Hi, I'm Aika Ray,
And I'm Ralph Rivas.
and this is the impact of the pandemic on the labor sector by the numbers. So, hello, hi, Ralph.
Hi, Aika.
Today we're joined by Sir Joshua Mata. He's the Secretary General of Labor Group Centro. Hello, sir.
Hi, Icam. Hello, Ralph. How are you?
Hi, sir. Trying hard to be to be good in this pandemic. Now, our topic is about the labor force. No, let me just run through some numbers. The latest labor force survey, February, number of unemployed Filipinos reached 4.2 million. That's actually higher than in January, but it's lower than the height of the 17.7% way back in 2020, which is around 7.3 million unemployed, the highest ever on record. Now, just to note, no, itong Philippine Statistics Authority ay monthly na sila magka-conduct ng survey to really monitor kung ano na bang impact at saka how deep the scars are in the labor market. Now,
That's right.
Joshua, what do you think the government is doing to bring jobs back? Is it enough, not enough, or talagang we're at the mercy of this virus?
Well, it's very little. That's the sad part. In fact, as early as last year, Centro, together with our broad coalition at CAISA, already submitted to the government um, a robust public employment program. No? Because we told them that in a crisis as deep as what we have right now, there is no way that the government can rely on the private sector to generate much needed jobs. And that's why we're saying that the government should be at the forefront in creating these jobs, in saving the jobs that are out there, and at the same time creating the jobs that we need in order to make sure na makakontrol natin yung unemployment natin. Unfortunately, the government seems hell-bent on this thinking that the economic recovery is just right around the corner. But you know what? That brings me back to the old days when you ask people in the rural areas, when you ask someone, saan po itong bahay na to? Oh, dyan lang. And then it takes you kilometers away walking and you're still still not there. So it seems like yung definition nila ng what's around the corner is really, really a huge corner na hindi natin nakikita kung nagtuturn na o hindi. And that's the problem. No? But I'm glad that now they're starting to develop what they call the NERS program, the National Economic Recovery Strategy. But when they presented it to us a few days ago, turns out that their target is just to maintain unemployment at 5%. And when we asked them, why 5%? Why not full employment? And then they said, well, first of all, there's no definition of full employment in this country. And to be honest, 5% is full employment for this country. And that was bizarre, for us. That's really bizarre because we thought that the whole slogan was build back better. So how do you build back better when, first of all, you don't have a strategy that aims to wipe out unemployment, if you like, at least to a level where it goes down to people who are really not willing to work at this point in time. And then at the same time, the government is not willing to come up with more funds to stimulate the economy in order to generate jobs. So that's the problem. So if you ask me, what is government doing? I think it's really too little at this point in time. They need to step up if they want to address the crisis that we have. And some economists are saying, I just read in the papers this morning, there were some think tanks who were saying that unless the government steps up, we will probably won't recover. We won't recover until 2024. That would once again make us literally the sick man of Asia all over again.
Yeah,
So
but I want to challenge that, no, na parang you're calling on government to generate jobs, but with this pandemic that people are afraid to go out, consumer confidence is at an all-time low. How
Right.
can you bring jobs back? Ano bang klaseng trabaho yung nakikita ninyong pwedeng ma-generate amid this very challenging business environment?
Well, there's a lot of things that we need to do at this point in time if we really need to build back better. And we think that these things that needs to be done can only be done by the government. Social tasks, like for example, stepping up our the capacity to provide health to everyone. Strengthening our public health program. Did you know that yung mga barangay health workers natin, even at this point in time, are not even considered regular workers? Can you imagine? They are at the forefront of our efforts to deal with this pandemic, and yet you're relying on people who, for the longest time, have been working for government, and yet are not considered as regular workers. Why not regularize them? Why not expand them? We have one of our biggest problems in dealing with this pandemic is the fact that we have so little capacity to trace, to contact trace, to isolate, and to treat people. I mean, the contact tracing czar himself admitted that that's a complete failure. So why not expand more and pay these people properly? And that's just one part. What about the need for us, for example, to rehabilitate all our environmental areas, rehabilitate our coastline areas, riverine areas, reforest, do things that we need to do in the first place in order to address and mitigate the climate change that we're facing? What about, for example, um, uh, ensuring that many communities in our archipelago would have their electricity to renewable energy? I mean, there's a lot of things out there that needs to be done, but the private sector would obviously not go into it because these are not necessarily profitable things to do. So these are things that the government needs to do. Essentially, what we need to do is what we're saying is that we need our own type of Green New Deal, if you like, no? Where the state is an activist state that steps up and does the things that needs to be done, simply because the private sector can't be relied to do it, no? Especially not now that there's no market out there. Interestingly, we had a discussion with our economic managers, no, or economic mismanagers, depending on what you want to call them, and we presented these ideas. No, we call it unemployment SWOG. No, it's an acronym for the public employment program that we are promoting. And they listened to us. No, and we told them that the government really needs to spend money. And it says, well, we have so little money to speak about. Then we said, no, that's not true. We can collect the taxes from the wealthiest of our wealthy people, just a few people who are billionaires out here in this country, and will generate much more resources than we need in order to address the entire problem with pandemic.
So
And
Joshua,
and then
let me
and
just
then
cut
they
you off
balked
there.
at
No,
that idea.
so you're pushing for a wealth tax, much
Yes,
like
exactly. Exactly. We feel that now is the way to do it. No? And you've seen the reports quite recently. Despite the fact that all of us are suffering, many of our people are going hungry. We know for a fact that the few billionaires that we have actually ratcheted up their income during the pandemic. Now, obviously, many people would rile with the idea. How is that possible? No? When they ask me, how is that possible? Well, I'll tell them, well, that's capitalism. Welcome to capitalism, where only us, ordinary mortals, would not profit from it, but those who have no money would actually profit from disaster and pandemics such as what we're having right now. So, what better way to redistribute that wealth that have filtered up during the pandemic than to impose wealth tax on these few people?
yeah, Joshua. Let me follow up on that on the wealth tax. No, actually, I did a story, a
Yeah,
two-part report on that, on how much the tycoons earned amid the pandemic, and I got quite some comments actually stating that bakit ba natin sisisihin, halimbawa yung mga telco tycoons, kinailangan natin ng internet ngayon. Why blame them for us needing internet and them gaining profit from it? Or, they donated this and that amid the pandemic. Tapos ngayon, titirahin natin sila and ask for higher taxes. Ikasama nga naman sila sa top taxpayers in the country, as stated in the figures of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So, what's your take on that?
Well, that's interesting. No, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It appears that they're saying that we're punishing them because they earned more money out of our misery. No, 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 no. Hang on. That's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is that we need to ensure that the economy is actually growing with equity. Because in the long run, if we allow the economy to grow with huge disparity between the rich and the poor, you will always have a problem in our society. And if you want a more stable society, then it is only right, it is only proper that those who have more should contribute more. Those who have less should contribute less to the upkeep of our economy. Let's talk about, for example, this vaccination program that we have right now. What's the problem here? Well, obviously, there is a government failure in terms of strategy. Obviously, there is the problem there is some truth to the fact that they dropped the ball in negotiating for access. But there is also a problem with the reality that the vast majority of all the vaccines that are being produced today were hoarded by the rich countries. Now that's at the global level. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is that we don't have much vaccines here in this country, and therefore, even if they manage to get all these rich countries manage to get themselves vaccinated 3 times over, if they want, but the fact that we are not vaccinated, then they are looking at the possibility that the virus will jump back at them in a more virulent way. Why? Well, because we will what do you call that? We will be great material around which these viruses could mutate in a more virulent way and then get back right at them. Is that the kind of society that we want to live in? That's not, no. So it's only proper that if you have so much, you have to redistribute it. No, so this is not a form of punishment. This is actually ensuring that everyone is contributing to building back better. That's equity.
Okay. So, sir, having said that, no, do you think that the government's response sa COVID-19 actually affect job security? Because we're seeing, you mentioned earlier, that even in the government, there are a lot of, mga JO, job order, yung mga contract of service, ganyan. You're also saying na parang the government should hire them?
Yeah, why not? What we're saying is that in a situation where the private sector cannot be relied on to generate jobs that we need, then it's important for the state to step in and generate the jobs and provide jobs to people. That is what we call employment guarantees. What we're calling for as a solution to this entire economic and health crisis that we're facing is one, for government to come up with a public employment program that's strong enough, robust enough to provide first jobs guarantee, meaning people who lost their jobs should be provided at least 100-day guaranteed jobs that have been experimented successfully in India, and it's now being experimented as well in South Africa, and therefore it's time for us to step it up. No, I mean we had Tupad program before, which is a 10-day emergency program that wouldn't cut. No, but we're saying that, well, why not ratchet it up? No, rather than say 10 days of guaranteed jobs, why not make it 100 days? Why not even make it longer if you can? No? So guaranteed jobs is what we're calling for. We're calling for income guarantees, which means people who still have jobs but are unable to work because of lockdown, because of the pandemic situation, and therefore would start losing their income, they should be provided with basic income that's equivalent to their minimum wage, or 10,000 pesos a month, whichever is higher. We're also calling for wage subsidies so that people who are working, particularly in medium scale, small scale industries that are in danger of being shut down because they can no longer sustain themselves. Well, government should step in and protect these jobs by providing wage subsidies anywhere from 50% of the monthly income to 75% of the monthly income, provided that the company or that the enterprise would keep these jobs. So there are many ways to deal with this. The problem is the government has to shift its mindset and think that rather than hope that the private sector would step in, that they should be doing it themselves. We should know by now, no? And Ralph, you're a much better economist than I am, so you should know this better. They try to provide loans, lots of it, tons of it, right? But take a look. Who are the takers? Are there anyone actually taking these loans? Why would they? Why would the employers take on loans when they are not even sure if they can profit from it? So what do? We just wait until everyone, dies of hunger? Of course not. The state has to come in, and the state has to use the resources that it has in order to make sure that the economy runs and its people actually can feed themselves.
You mentioned kanina na you were able to talk to the economic managers. No? Were you able to discuss anything about the latest round of ayuda for Greater Manila area?
Well, unfortunately, the last time we had a discussion with them, apart from the nurse consultation that we had yesterday, the last time that we actually had a chance to sit down and discuss this with them was late last year. No? And when we presented this idea, they seemed to be okay with it. But when we said, but when they responded that we have a problem of limited resources, and then we said, well, we have a proposal, wealth tax. And their response was, well, we can always tax the real estate of these rich people. And we said, we're not talking about real estate tax. That's different. There is a need for us to revise our real estate taxes, even make sure that properties whose value rise because of development programs, like for example, if you put up a train station in someone's neighboring lot, then that lot would obviously increase its value, over time. Therefore, you can adjust the taxes for those lots, and that's the way many countries, many cities around the world are doing it. We can do that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual wealth hidden by these billionaires in their banks, in their stocks, in their stock market, in their bonds, financial wealth that they have hidden. Let's tax them, and we have calculated just ask less than anywhere from 1% to 3%, of their wealth, is enough to generate hundreds of billions of pesos for all of us.
Now, clarification na Joshua, individual ito or companies, corporate? Kasi
individual.
Individuals.
Okay, pero go after individual. At iba pa yung corporate taxes, syempre, di ba? Iba yung individual.
Yeah, because dito sa yung logic naman kasi ng economic team, di ba kakapasa lang natin ng create law, and the logic there is that we'd free up, bababa yung taxes ng corporate ng mga korporasyon para magkaroon sila ng more money to expand their business and keep people working and expand their business. So I think I'm not sure. Wala pang masyadong discussions on wealth tax, no? Taxing the 1% of this of Philippine society, but based on that logic of the economic team, that seems to be the reasoning, diba? So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think we need to question that reasoning, because that's just the latest variation of the whole trickle-down effect theory that we both know doesn't work. It never worked. The whole Reaganite economics that's been promoted in the US, even up to the time of Trump, resulted precisely to the kind of skewed economic development that they had, where there's so much wealth for so little people, but so much poverty for so many people. simply because the theory doesn't work. It doesn't mean that if you cut the taxes of the rich, they'll put more money into investment. That's not where they put it. They use it to buy yachts. They use it to buy tickets to be able to go to the moon. So these are the kind of expenditures that they do. Come on, it's flawed. It's wrong. And if there's anything that we should learn, as a nation, in this pandemic, is the fact that the whole development logic that we have been using all these years is a failure. So we need to rethink and come up with new development models that would really fit our needs. And that's exactly what we're trying to tell people now. No? If you want to build better, you cannot build by just going back to where we were before, because in the first place, where we were before was not good for many workers. To be honest, it's never good. I mean, even before the pandemic, people were suffering from unemployment. People were suffering from low income. For crying out loud, there's a recent study that says that that Manila is one of the most expensive cities in our part of the world. Where rent is the second highest to Singapore. Can you imagine? Second highest to Singapore, and we're paying one of the costliest electricity rates in the world. Don't tell me that we're going to suffer and try to rebuild our economy only to go back to that kind of a situation. That's not a great deal for many works. That's not even a deal for us. So what we're saying is that we really need a new deal, and that deal has to be green. That deal has to make sure that people have better jobs, people have better lives, people have better incomes.
Okay, so I want to talk about wages naman kasi recall that inflation talagang it already breached the government target. Actually, inflation in the first quarter is already 4.5%. That's beyond
That's right.
the 2 to 4% target of the government. Now,
Right.
there are talks for higher wages. But I mean, kaya ba to amid the pandemic na struggling rin na magbukas yung companies? Kasi I'd imagine, well, actually may reports na rin saying na workers are hesitant to ask for a raise. Kasi
Yep.
kung raise yan, parang iti-threaten naman sila na mawawalan sila ng trabaho. So, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there are some sectors in the labor movement who are demanding for such a thing, but for us in the Kaisa, what we're after for at this point in time is to make sure that we are able to address the pandemic, we are able to address the economic crisis, and build back better. And to do that, what we need is a more universal form of ayuda, if you like. No, when we first proposed our ideas last year, we talked about guaranteed income. We were very, very clear in avoiding universal basic income as a concept because we knew at the time, we were afraid at that time that people were not prepared to discuss these things. But if you ask me personally, I'd rather talk of universal basic income than talk of wage increases. At this point in time. And to me, that's a far more better way of addressing the situation for everyone. No,
Sir,
so-
very briefly, can you elaborate lang po kung ano po yung universal basic income for our watchers right now?
Well, it's an idea where everyone, rich or poor, in its purest form, everyone, rich or poor, actually gets a basic set of income that the government provides to them, and that ensures that people don't have to go poor just because they don't have a job or just because their incomes are low. It just makes sure that everyone would have the means in order to live, and that's paid for by the state. Now, in a capitalist system, when everyone have such an income, then they actually help promote keep the capitalist system going because they would purchase, right? That's the logic of it. Now, obviously, our idea of universal basic income is not the same with the ideas of others who would say that, okay, let's have a universal basic income, but then you have to pay for your own health, you have to pay for your own education, let's privatize everything. Obviously, that's not the kind of idea. That's not the kind of universal basic income we're gunning for. No, so I think at this point in time, we need to first think about recovering. No, but I wouldn't stop people from asking for additional wages, especially if they're working in a company that are able to do so. Because as we all know, there are companies who are actually, you know, ratcheting profits from out of this misery of ours. They should be paying their workers better.
So, ano pong plans for Labor Day?
Great question. There's still a pandemic. That's the first point.
Mhm.
So in this, particularly in the guys specifically Centro, we're not so keen on mobilizing people out in the streets at the time that there is such a huge surge. No, we're not that keen, but in doing that. But it's important for us to celebrate the Labor Day, if only to remind the government that despite the fact that they are killing us, literally hunting down trade unions, despite the fact that they are red tagging many of us, but in many parts of the country, the labor movement is alive and well. And the way to do that is to remind them, and the way to do that is to continue mobilizing, but this time online. We are thinking of having a protest action that is safe, physical protest action that is safe. Like, for example, we're thinking of having a motorcade around Metro Manila in the morning of May 1. But the bigger part of motorcades are safe, but that means it's only for our members who have access to vehicles. So they stay in their own vehicles, then there's no need for us to worry about our activity being a super spreader of the virus because we can do this safely. But the biggest part of our celebration on May 1 would be online. And I'm glad to report that all unions, practically all unions of different colors, are ideological persuasion, will be working together in an online event on May 1.
So on a related note po, no, workers and unionists, as you mentioned, have been a target of the government crackdown, no, literally killing them. Bloody Sunday, 9 activists were killed. Recently, Dandy Miguel was killed, di ba? Habang siya yung colleagues niya, yung mga, I mean, sad to say, sila yung nauna, tapos siya yung sinundan, no?
That's right.
Ano nang naging response po ng government dito? No? Has the government agreed to convene the high-level monitoring body on the National Tripartite Peace Council to review freedom of association guidelines?
Well, that's one of the things that they agreed to us when we met with them. What was this? I think last week. No, we had a meeting with the Department of Labor, with the national leadership, with Secretary Belli himself. We met with him in order to raise a lot of the issues that we're facing regarding red tagging, trade union killings, and other forms of violations of freedom of association. But let me go back a bit. No? I need to remind everyone that as early as 2019, the labor movement has successfully lobbied the International Labor Organization to ask the Philippine government to invite sending an ILO high-level mission. Now, the last time this was done was during the time of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. And when the ILO high-level mission was sent to the Philippines and finally the government was forced to invite the high-level mission at that time, it led to a whole series of reforms that went all the way to the time of the Aquino government, which led to a drastic decline in the number of killings. So it worked. It didn't stop killings. No, I mean, even during the time of Aquino, there were trade union killings, unfortunately, but the number of it drastically declined. Now, with the coming of this administration, we saw right at the moment that even before they got into Malacanang, killings already started. No, and it's sad to say that that Centro actually is one of the first trade unions that suffered from trade union killings. One of our own organizer in Cebu, Lando Abangan, was gunned down in November of 2016. No, and since then, it appears that more than 50 now. I actually lost count of the number, but there are now more than 50 people. Some say people are saying we're now close to 60 trade union leaders who has been murdered since 2016, and none of this has led to any arrest. None of this has led to any any conviction, no, which creates this whole climate of impunity that many corporations, even transnational corporations, are actually using in order to bust the union and red tag us. So one of the things that we also ask the government is to once again remind them to invite the ILO high-level mission. And this time around, when we met the secretary last week, he said that finally they have invited the ILO high-level mission, but they want it done online, which is obviously problematic because how do you inspect all allegations of trade union killings, red tagging, and violations of FOA when it's not physically done? So obviously we would have to wait for a better time when the team coming from from ILO could safely come over and do the job of investigating all the allegations that we made about freedom of association. So that's one action that they should be doing. But we're saying that they should not do this online, that it should be done physically. Second, while waiting for the ILO high-level mission, we're saying that we should convene the high-level monitoring body precisely to look at all these trade union violations, trade union rights violations. But there are many things that we also ask. For example, a simple request, like we ask Secretary Bello, can you possibly promptly respond and speak publicly, condemn killings or red tagging the moment we tell you to do so. I mean, the moment you get a report that such a thing is happening. And fortunately agreed. So let's see. We also asked them, can we have point persons from the Department of Labor, both at the national and regional level, so that when we are being red tagged, when any one of us is being arrested, or when there is a grave violation of freedom of association, they can be the point person that we can go to. A go-to point person, if you like. Again, they agreed. So those are encouraging things. But the fact remains that red tagging is still there, and once our people are red tagged, then you're now liable to be vulnerable to. You're now open to a whole host of harassments and intimidation, ranging from receiving text messages, threatening text messages or text calls, all the way to your homes being raided, all the way to you being arrested. Well, and in some cases, extreme cases, you can even be killed. And the police would simply say na nanlaban ka. So that's still happening, and that's the reason why we're still working on making sure that the government actually investigates cases properly.
Do you think the recent PNP proposal is actually, related to harassing unionists, or is this simply, an additional bureaucratic layer that they want government agencies to just use their system?
We'd like to. I personally think that it is part and parcel of their, whole of nation approach, if you like. Don't forget that the PNP came out with a scheme called JIPCO. What does JIPCO means? Joint Industrial Concerns, no? And in the founding documents of JIPCO, which the PNP presented to PEZA, the authority that's dealing with export processing zones, it is clearly said that the whole initiative is to weed away radical unions. That's exactly the phrase they use, radical unions. They didn't define what radical union means, which to my mind means anything that they feel is radical. So whatever they feel, whatever they say is radical, then they would be radical. Then that's their definition of a radical union. And we had a meeting with them in January last year, just early last year in January, just before the pandemic, and we told them and explained to the PNP top leadership that this initiative is actually contrary to law. It's contrary to the guidelines that the PNP signed with the Department of Labor all the way back in 2011, no, where they said that that issues at the export processing zones should be dealt with exclusively. Labor issues should be dealt with exclusively by the Department of Labor. And you know what? In January, when we met with the PNP leadership, they said, yeah, you're right. Okay, so we'll suspend it. What happened? When we were locked down, JIPCO process, the JIPCO process went ahead and they started signing memorandum of agreements with export processing zones in many parts of the country. So that's really bad. And what's the result of that? We now know that in some areas, it's actually this initiative, JIPCO, is the one that's in a way institutionalizing red tagging. They're the ones profiling trade unionists, profiling organizers, profiling workers who they feel are involved in organizing drives. And then they are the ones who are actually red tagging many unions. So now they have this new proposal that they want all workers who would want to have access to all types of Department of Labor services. Like, for example, well, if you want to file a simple money claims because your employer didn't pay you properly, now you have to go to them and ask for a police clearance. Now, what is the problem with that? Well, the problem with that, so some people say, what's the problem with that? Well, in the first place, it's so hard for workers at this point in time. Even without that, it's already hard enough for workers to access their rights and access the services of the Department of Labor. Now you're adding another layer. No, well, then that means it's going to be much more harder now for workers to access their right to be served by the Department of Labor, who during the time of the pandemic is, clearly practicing real social distancing with their constituency. The Department of Labor was the first institution to practice social distancing, literally social distancing with the trade union movement. So it's not just another layer, and in fact, it's another source of racket for workers who are already reeling from the pandemic, who are losing their incomes, and now you're going to ask the police wants to collect more money because of this police clearances that they're asking for. This is a joke. No, it's a joke. It would have been funny had it not been a sick joke.
Now here, Department of Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara said, parang he's basically dismissing parang he thinks it's a policy issue rather than a legal one. But of course, I asked you, I asked other labor unions who say na it might infringe on freedom of association rights, diba? So what can you say about that?
Well, I think that's the myopic way of viewing things, no? Kasi it's both a policy that's wrong, and it's a legal issue that's also very problematic. In fact, we told our colleagues, our comrades in the labor movement, that even if the Department of Labor is now doing an online survey among workers on how they feel about this new policy, and first of all, we feel that, why do you even have to do that? When in fact it should have just simply rejected this because it is patently unconstitutional. But having said that, we vowed our leaders told us that and directed us, in fact, that even if the Department of Labor goes ahead with it, then we would have to hold them to court and question this all the way to the Supreme Court, because this is not simply another layer in the bureaucracy. This is actually going to infringe on our constitutional rights.
Okay. So that's it. We don't have a lot of time, but thank you so much, Joshua Mata.
Thank you very much, Aika, and thank you, Ralph. Thanks for giving me the time for this.
I am Aika Ray.
And I'm Ralph Rivas.
This is the pandemic impact on the labor sector by the numbers.